Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it, especially if you love the movies?
Tango Shalom is now available on all VOD
major platforms. I think we messed that up.
Video on demand, or as they say in the trade, VOD.
VOD. Tango Shalom is now available on all VOD platforms,
which means
video on demand.
Look how you know. You must be a high school graduate.
I'm a college graduate.
Really?
Yes.
I got an honorary degree from Hofstra. Did you get an honorary degree?
No, I got a degree.
Oh, well, I got honorary. You know, I'm in the Jewish Museum.
What for?
What do you mean? As a famous Jew in the Bronx. I'm in the famous...
I'm in the Prospect Park in the Stones.
How big is the stone?
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the still yet undefined after years, existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. Once again, I'm robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 769, dude. Yeah, that's right, 769. It's a Friday. I can't believe this is, every time I get up to these big numbers, every number's another big number because it was bigger than the number before. I'm just astonished by the whole thing. Anyway, new Steven Spielberg movie's out. I've wanted to see him make a musical since 1984, and the opening number, Anything Goes, from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and he's done it. It's not a remake. He's readapted West Side Story. That was originally co-directed by Jerome Robbins and Robert Wise. Of course, Mr. Stephen Sondheim's work on display. It's kind of weird. You had Tick, Tick, Boom. You have West Side Story, and Mr. Sondheim passed away. But I kind of like the fact that he's kind of in the public consciousness. Again, it makes me really want to go see Sunday in the Park with George. I didn't even know what a pointillist was until I saw that show. I really like that show. I'm a Sondheim fan. It's interesting. It's funny. I did grow up and went to a lot of musicals, and I went to a lot of symphonies. My grandmother took me to a lot of symphonies. One of the greatest things I ever saw was Beethoven's Ninth with a 160-piece choral section. Growing up in Seattle, we had the Seattle Symphony was great. The Seattle Opera was great. They even staged a sci-fi version of Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung, Das Rheingold, Gute Dämmerung. Yeah, come on, it's all good stuff. I don't see enough. I don't see enough musicals. Elizabeth and I used to go see, we'd buy like a series and go see 4 musicals. We even saw Amelie, the musical, it was all right. It was kind of interesting. It was all right, But hey, I'm looking forward to seeing West Side Story this weekend. Very excited. Also, I believe Up in the Air has opened, the new Adam McKay film. As you know, I'm kind of obsessed with The Big Short, so I'm very excited to see these movies. And by the way, for those of you who want to know about the Designing Hollywood podcast, a new podcast that I recently did just dropped with Janty Yates, who is Ridley Scott's longtime costume designer. I thought we had a lovely, rollicking conversation. So check that out. And of course, in 6 days, I'm going to see Spider-Man No Way Home with John Campea at his special screening. Looking forward to that. And of course, it opens on the 17th. And, there's been a lot of talk. I'll flat out say it. I mean, I have been, as a longtime comic book reader, literally my whole life, I have really kind of been enjoying Marvel Phase 4, which really began with the new shows, WandaVision. We had WandaVision, we had Falcon the Winter Soldier, we had Loki, What If. Now we've had 4 episodes of Hawkeye, and we've had Shang-Chi, and we've had the Eternals all this year. And I have to say that I've been thoroughly enjoying all of these things. Now, are they as wildly fulfilling as, say, the 1-2 punch of Infinity War and Endgame? Perhaps not. But we had a long time leading up to those things. But I found Shang-Chi wildly entertaining. I really enjoyed WandaVision. I really enjoyed Falcon the Winter Soldier. And I really enjoyed Loki, even though I did think it pushed the Marvel Universe a little too far. Of course, you all know me. I mean, Infinity Gauntlet Ultron's one of the coolest things ever. Can't wait to get that hot toy. I enjoyed the What If series, and I've been enjoying Hawkeye. Wildly divergent entertainment all over the place in terms of tone and feeling, which I've really liked. And I really liked Eternals. And a lot of people I know didn't, and I've listened to everybody's problems with the Eternals. I understand them. But for me, it's a throwback to what it was like to actually read Marvel Comics, in that they were all over the place. Like, you'd get a mini-series, you didn't know what it was about. I remember reading Ann Nesenti's and Arthur Adams. Was it Ann Nesenti? I think she did. It was Ann Nesenti wrote. I remember getting the Longshot miniseries when they introduced the character of Longshot, and I was like, "Wow, this is wild," And I was digging through my old Marvel comics, and I'm gonna get these were epic. I mean, these were epic, but they're from Epic Comics. I found my old Doug Mensch and Paul Gulacy 6 from Sirius. This is 2 miniseries, 6 from Sirius and 6 from Sirius 2. I don't think these were ever collected. I've been pulling stuff out of my comic collection that I'm going to get bound. I'm going to get these bound because there's no demand for 6 from Sirius. But I like these comics. I really like Paul Gulacy's art. Of course, Paul Gulacy drew a lot of the Master of Kung Fu's that I love. So I'm actually going to have these. I mean, these are in cherry condition. I just took them out of the Mylars they were in. But I'm going to send them in and have them bound into a hardcover. So, when I die, someone will be like, "What's this?" Probably not. Maybe they'll throw it away. But it'll be very nicely bound. And, I just loved the kind of diversity of storytelling that you used to get. Like, you never, especially like in the 80s. I really got back into comic book collecting back in the early 80s when I read the Doug Mensch, Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight, and when I was reading X-Men and Teen Titans. And then I got into like the Baxter versions of comics. I have Legion of Superheroes and First Comics with American Flag and like Pacific Comics when they were Mike Grell's Star Slayer. And the diversity in terms of the stories that I was reading in terms of comics they were all over the place. And it was a lot of fun. Some were more gratifying than others. But it was like all pop culture in the 80s. It was this sort of heady mix of all kinds of things. Like, I was listening to like Soft Cell's nonstop erotic cabaret, and I was listening to Depeche Mode and New Order and Prince. And I mean, it was just the music was very diverse, and comics were very diverse, and stories were very diverse. And the thing was, I didn't expect all of these things to be the most fulfilling story I ever saw or read or listened to. This was the best album I've ever heard. I want it to be good, And I feel like the point of Marvel Phase 4 to me so far has been that kind of storytelling. And the overarching theme for all of this kind of thing has been family to a certain extent. And I like that. I mean, I like the idea that people, whether it's families, people have forged, characters have forged, or it's the bonds of family. Like I really like Sam Wilson's relationship with his sister in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I really enjoyed. I think I enjoyed that series a lot more than most, even though I understand they had to change the storyline within the confines because of the pandemic and all that. But I really enjoyed the idea of Sam Wilson. I've talked about it a lot on the show, having to figure out if he can accept the mantle of Captain America or not, especially with the legacy of how the United States, even within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the way the United States treated Black Americans. And I thought that was a very worthwhile story to tell. Was it the best version of that story? Well, obviously we know it was compromised a bit because of the way it had to be produced, because they had to change the storyline because it was originally about a pandemic. Who knew that we were going to be in a global pandemic? But I liked it. And while I thought I've enjoyed it as a longtime comic fan, and yet there's a lot of people that will look at things like, look, I like the character of Kate Bishop when she was introduced in Young Avengers, and I've really been enjoying kind of the buddy nature of Hawkeye. It's a smaller story. It's basically set in a couple of neighborhoods in New York, and sure, people can say, well, she comes from a very privileged background. So, so do a lot of superheroes. I've enjoyed it, and I love that they took it right out of Matt Fraction's storyline from the Hawkeye comics. And is it all perfect? No. Is it as fulfilling as I might want it to be? No. But overall, I'm enjoying it. And I feel that while some of it's better, some of these Phase 4 movies are better than others, I find them all fun to watch. I find them all entertaining, and for the most part, they're also thought-provoking. I mean, maybe Hawkeye not so much, but I really like Haley Steinfeld and Jeremy Renner's camaraderie, and I like what's going on. But it's a small, slight story, and by design. And there's been a lot of that car chase sequence was pretty great. There's a couple of single shots in there that were really impressive. And yet, let's face it, there are other articles that I've read on the show covering movies and box office. The box office, I mean, Shang-Chi was pushing, it got past $400 million. Eternals didn't quite get there. Black Widow, kind of the box office returns are not, as we all know, the first 23 movies in the Infinity Saga, when you average them out, all 23, they average out to $1 billion a film. Now, we're nowhere near that. We've now had 3 movies that don't. They're not near. They've definitely brought the average down. If you want to start Phase 4 over, they've actually performed comparable, sort of, to the beginnings of Marvel Phase 1 and 2. I mean, obviously, Iron Man 1 did. I think it did like something like $525 million or something. But it's they're rebuilding. And now with the even though Spider-Man No Way Home, which comes out in a week, obviously is a Sony release, I consider it as part of the MCU. And Spider-Man Far From Home did over $1 billion. We're still in the pandemic. Apparently, Spider-Man is not going to be released in China because they're just fucking with us now at this point. But a lot of the Marvel movies that relied on Chinese box office have not. I mean, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, for various reasons, have not been released. They did not have the release that other Marvel films have recently had. So there's a reason why their box office isn't as good. But I think of all the movies, I do think that Spider-Man No Way Home, I mean, I can't remember, not since, I guess Endgame. The hype is real. They've done a great job. I do not know for a fact if Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are even in this movie. I would assume they are. I think there's also characters that people don't know are in this movie that you're going to see in the movie that no one's even talking about. Maybe. And I think it's going to be a really interesting movie. I think it's going to be more interesting. They have shown us, from what I understand, actually I know, very little of this movie. Let's just say there's a lot more surprises to be had in Spider-Man No Way Home than even what is the quote that had been dreamt of in your reality? A little Shakespeare. That's I'm paraphrasing, but so the question is, where are we at? I mean, I still think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is as vibrant as it's ever been. Clearly, though, the money involved, we're not exactly in the same environment that we were in 2 years ago. There's an article that was published yesterday in The Guardian that I wanted to touch upon because it's easy, it's easy to write these kinds of articles, but I thought it was worth sharing because you know me and my articles. This was a box office analysis global. It was in The Guardian yesterday. It was written by James Hanton. It was published at noon yesterday, Eastern Standard Time. Spider-Man faces his toughest challenge yet, rescuing Marvel Studios, Inc. Marvel is on the ropes. But are they? Are they? I don't think they are. But okay, if the perception is now that they're on the ropes, fine. Will Tom Holland's latest outing be its savior, or will the film get tangled in its own web of cliches? Web of cliches. Come on, James. Have you seen the movie yet? This year has been an experimental one for Marvel. And by the way, rightfully so. They are building up again. After no big releases in 2020, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has branched out into new, fully integrated television shows and hybrid blockbuster releases to sit alongside its main cinema offerings. Much of it has been met with praise and adoration, but more recent releases have failed to capture the imagination in the same way as previous fan favorites. Since the summer highs of Loki and What If, were they though? I mean, there's many people that weren't big fans of Loki or What If, but okay. Since the summer highs of Loki and What If, the MCU has been on a downward spiral, the likes of which it has never seen before. Well, I would say to this article, no. They're going back to the beginning and they are rebuilding, giving us something like Shang-Chi, which is a lesser-known character than even Iron Man was. And Shang-Chi, while not making $1 billion because that's what it has been expected of it, it's made over $400 million, which is a respectable amount of money, and they've already announced a sequel. Black Widow and Shang-Chi are burdened by the weight of 24 other films bearing down on them, neither feeling completely at ease going off in their own direction. Is that true? Eternals, which at least tries to offer something more intellectually and emotionally challenging, suffers from being overly detailed and slow. But does it? Like, I would say, as an astute moviegoer, I liked that film quite a bit. I've seen it 3 times. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, overly detailed and slow, I mean, are these movies supposed to have all the same pace? But anyway, this meekness is reflected in the box office. Meekness. Wait a minute. Tries to offer something more intellectually and emotionally challenging. Is that meekness, James? Is it meekness? That meekness is reflected in the box office, which, even allowing for a global pandemic, is disappointing. For the first time since 2014, no MCU release has broken into the top 6 highest-grossing films of the year globally. With No Time to Die, Fast and Furious 9, Godzilla vs. Kong sitting comfortably above them. In fact, the most successful Marvel-branded film of the year, Venom: Let There Be Carnage, isn't even an MCU entry. Isn't it, though? We'll see. I mean, certainly at the end, there's a little bit of a crossover. Things aren't much better on the small screen. Hawkeye, centered on the blandest Avenger of them all, has reported the lowest viewing figures of any live-action MCU Disney series so far. The franchise's future may still look exciting, but critically and commercially, the MCU is more on the ropes than it ever has been. Is it, though? Is it? Hawkeye was designed to be the kind of show it is. It's a show that's literally about a superhero having to deal with the ramifications of his actions during the blip, who's really just trying to get home to his family before Christmas. And he winds up, because of his own legacy, helping a woman out, a young woman, who might have been killed for things that he'd done. It is a small, but yet I think very entertaining show because it is doing what it set out to do. It's not failing at what it set out to do. And of course, Hawkeye is not the sexy, doesn't have the sexy patriotic vibe of Steve Rogers, and of course isn't as fun perhaps as Tony Stark. But we haven't never really gotten to know him. And by design, was Hawkeye ever supposed to be? Did they ever think of it as, I don't know, burning up the television charts? No, I think what Hawkeye is doing, what they are doing is they are creating a continuum. And this continuum is going to exist for a long time. And I think what they're doing by giving us a diversity of storytelling, they're actually bolstering their brand because all of these shows are very well crafted, certainly lovingly made, and I think they're a lot of fun. The problem is everyone's going into these things expecting what? That they're going to change your lives or something? I don't know. But I certainly don't think the MCU is on the ropes, especially not with the way that they've been playing this release of Spider-Man No Way Home. Hopefully, Spider-Man No Way Home can swing in to remind everybody what these films can do. The hype for Tom Holland's third outing as the most iconic of all Marvel heroes, pre-MCU at least, exceeds that of any of the other releases this year. And it desperately needs to deliver. This is the 8th Spider-Man movie in the past 2 decades. No Way Home will relish this, using the multiverse as an excuse to bring back villains from the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield era films, from Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin to Jamie Foxx's Electro. While this is cause for excitement, it raises a difficult question. Is the MCU so unsure of itself that it feels a need to pander to nostalgia so obviously? This is not an excuse in creative liberty. Instead, it feels like the nervous backup plan of a studio jittery about its continued success. In doing so, the MCU risks shooting itself in the foot, prioritizing fleeting thrills and dramatic character returns in the place of a story that realizes how less can be more. Bruh, I just want to say, you haven't seen the movie. I mean, these assumptions, first of all, they have made a very conscious effort to tell sort of a mini saga across many platforms here. At the end of Far From Home, we saw J. Jonah Jameson. That could have been the first instance of, well, it was the first instance of a crossover. Then, of course, we got whatever the Quicksilver thing was in WandaVision. They've been building up to this. This isn't just, oh, we're going to turn Spider-Man into some one-off where we're going to bring back all these characters. They are doing what Marvel Comics has always done. Tell big crossover stories that are supposed to be fun and entertaining. And the way they've played coy with an audience wondering whether or not Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are going to show up as Spider-Man, well, I think they've done a masterful job of it. And lest we not forget, a lot of this began with the animated Into the Spider-Verse. That was the animated film that won the Academy Award. So this is not something that just came out of nowhere. This was something that they looked at other things that had been successful, and I think they're having a lot of fun with it. I mean, I have to say, the build-up and the anticipation to Spider-Man No Way Home has been a lot of fun. I've found it to be wildly entertaining. And the way they've played coy with us, I mean, what's not to love about that? Aren't we having fun with all of this? I know I am. Less can be more. Why would you want less to be more? It's the 3rd Spider-Man movie in the first Tom Holland Spider trilogy. Why not go big or go home? Why not have some fun with this? It looks fun to me. I mean, when you see J.K. Simmons saying, "Is that a dinosaur?" I smile every time. The plot structure behind MCU films, for so long a large part of their success, also threatens to weigh No Way Home down. Did it weigh Civil War down? Did it weigh Infinity War and Endgame down? The arrival of Doctor Strange presents Peter Parker yet again with a pseudo-father figure on whom to unload his personal insecurities and engage in witty banter with. Now, that is a very valid point. A lot of people have pointed out, especially John Campea, a number of times, how you do feel that Spider-Man sometimes is a guest in his own movie. I personally would love to see a Spider-Man movie where he's all alone, perhaps when he fights Kraven, or whatever they're gonna do there. I would like that. I was hoping that the third Spider-Man movie would have been called Homefront, and he would have had to have been the neighborhood Spider-Man. But I understand they've got to give everybody a big finale to this trilogy. It's not. I don't see it as a weakness. I see it as embracing what the MCU has always done. It's comic book origins. After the Vulture in Homecoming and Mysterio in Far From Home, this is the third time this particular narrative card has been played. Even in the trailers, there are unwelcome signs that this is not a role Strange will suit. "Let's Scooby-Doo this crap" is just an awful line. Well, I'm okay, but you can't tell me it doesn't put a smile on your face. Sure, it's a corny line, by design. If you're able to sit through a No Way Home with a checklist, checking off such cliches as the potential sacrifice of a loved one, a cheesy villain line, and some awkwardly delivered attempts at humor, you know something has gone very wrong. Has it? I mean, these are popcorn entertainments on a grand scale. As the MCU has grown, so has the need to dive into the lore of previous films. In this case, going beyond the single shared universe itself. In Shang-Chi, the reintroduction of Trevor Slattery does little to meaningfully move the story forward. Yeah, but it's fun. I like seeing Trevor Slattery come back, and obviously it made sense because it ties into the Ten Rings. With Eternals, discussions about the Avengers and Thanos feel forced. They do? They could have been removed entirely and the film would not have been any worse for it. Well, it wouldn't have necessarily been better either. I, as a longtime MCU viewer and I enjoy the MCU, I like these connections. That's what makes it all fun. That's why the MCU is different from any other franchise that we've ever had. Becoming part of an overwhelmingly interlinked series of films and TV shows means that each new movie or series is struggling to stand on its own 2 feet. Is it? I mean, Hawkeye is very different from Loki, and Loki's certainly very different from the rest of the MCU, as is Hawkeye. And I think that they do stand on their own 2 feet, and they add to the greater tapestry of the universe. There's a lot riding on Spider-Man's latest outing to move the MCU back onto solid ground, but there are no guarantees that it will. Yes, James, the MCU is on very solid ground. People are not tired of Marvel movies, as Venom proved, as No Way Home will prove, and whatever else is coming out will prove. Hopefully, No Way Home will revitalize a franchise that means so much to so many people. Perhaps it will be a roaring success, alleviating any fears about the quality of the MCU's future. But if it doesn't, this could prove to be a serious blow. Almost all of the other releases this year have been partially experimental, introducing new characters and stories. No Way Home is a return to a tried and tested fan favorite, or at least that's the plan. Because if a film starring one of the most iconic superheroes of all time fails to rekindle the MCU's fire, what will? I have to tell you, oops, didn't mean to do that. I just think that all of this doomsaying and all of this negativity, look, save negativity for things that really deserve it, like Star Trek Discovery. I mean, I think that the MCU is still, maybe it's not as, remember, we don't have it's no longer new. We're going into year 14 of the MCU. Now, sure, there's going to be some fatigue. They keep saying, well, there's going to be superhero fatigue. I don't think we're there yet. I think that the MCU still is providing grand entertainment. I mean, admittedly, even I, after watching the MCU for so long, I found ultimately the Infinity Saga and the story of Thanos and all of that to be incredibly satisfying overall. I even like going back and looking at something like Thor: The Dark World, which wasn't entirely successful for various reasons, or The Incredible Hulk, not as good as it should have been, perhaps. But watching them as part of the grander scheme of things, I really liked how they've incorporated even things like Thunderbolt Ross into the MCU. And I find it, well, a lot more satisfying watching modern MCU stuff from Phase 4 than watching one episode of Star Trek Discovery that, of course, makes me want to stick my head through a plate glass window, making sure my artery is cut, so I never have to wake up to that horror again. Perhaps I'm being a little hyperbolic, but that's kind of how I feel. I think that the MCU still has a lot to offer. It's still a lot of fun. It's grand entertainment. It's well-made entertainment. I really like all the actors. I think, look, you can say what you want about Haley Steinfeld all you want, but you know what? Kate Bishop was introduced in Young Avengers. She's a part of the MCU, and I think they couldn't have cast her better. I think that was the big breakout of the Hawkeye series by design, and if they are indeed leading up to a Young Avengers film or a Young Avengers series, I'm there for it, man. I'm enjoying it. And is it all perfect? No. Are there things that they could have done differently? Sure. But you know what? They could have just treaded the same water and tried to recreate things that we already have been given, but they're trying to do something different. I with some of my esteemed YouTube colleagues, I do disagree with certain assessments that we're getting things that perhaps are denigrating. Is Clint Barton being denigrated by his relationship with Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop? I don't think so. And Emil Johansson says the MCU has nothing left to prove after Endgame. Well, I would agree with that. And I like the fact that they're going back and they're trying new things and taking us in directions we haven't been before, and I've quite enjoyed it. So I would have to say that, Kevin Feige in an interview with Rotten Tomatoes said this. Feige clarified what he believes is the overarching theme of the MCU's current phase. Kevin Feige says, quote, "Truthfully, Phase 4 was always about continuing in new ways and new beginnings," he explained. "Even with films that seemingly are concluding storylines, there are new beginnings within them. After 3 phases largely revolving around the same core cast of characters, with the occasional newbie joining the fray, focusing entirely on new kids might be exactly what the MCU needs." And so I think that, the MCU is still very, very successful. And as we wait for things like the Book of Boba Fett to continue to re-energize the Star Wars franchise that, frankly, was driven into the ground by creators that might not know what they were doing, such as what J.J. Abrams did with the entire Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy. Forget Rian Johnson. I hated The Force Awakens, and I despise Rise of Skywalker. Those are 2 crimes against a franchise that should never have been allowed to happen. I understand how come they did happen, but what a mistake. Anyway, I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, compared to those debacles, is doing just fine. Anyway, got some letters from you. First one comes from Matthew in Japan. "Hello, Rob. How are you doing today? I wanted to write in because something fantastic happened the other day. Recently, the idea that there may be a fan-edited extended version of the Star Wars prequels popped into my head. And, as it had been many years since the last time I'd seen them, I decided to take a look online. Sure enough, I found some. There definitely are. As a result, the other day I ended up syncing up and watching it with my best friend, whom is currently still living and working in China, and for 2.5 hours, we had the time of our lives. I honestly find myself perplexed by the sheer number of people who go on and on about how terrible they thought the Phantom Menace was. I distinctly remember everyone in the cinema having an absolute blast with it. Amongst my friends and family, there was not a single person who thought it was terrible, and even when I was meeting other fans of Star Wars or science fiction, they had only positive things to say about it. Matthew, I would have to ask your age right there, but okay. Sure, parts of it were definitely cheesy, like Anakin flying into a combat zone as a kid and accidentally saving the day, but it would hardly be the only cheesy moment in the Star Wars franchise. No, it was just kind of bad. It was big, imaginative, and fun. It wasn't until after Revenge of the Sith that I started really noticing a lot of the really negative sentiment toward the prequels. I'm not saying it wasn't there before, but I don't think the films were as universally hated as the modern narrative suggests. Actually, they kind of were. I actually wonder if there is a hipster I hate the prequels before it was cool aspect to the whole thing. No, I would say that definitely the prequels were hated. I think there has been a reassessment of the prequels. As I've always said, I believe that the Star Wars prequels are bad movies. I do, however, think they're pretty good Star Wars. I've said that a lot. I don't know if that makes entirely a lot of sense, but I think it's kind of true. I think the overarching story of what's being told in the prequels is a very valid, very interesting story. I just think that George Lucas, his biggest crime was losing touch with humanity. And after you've made Star Wars and you're now George Lucas, what are you supposed to do? You know, he became a dad, was raising his kids. And I think that, he was kind of sequestered away and forgot how real people act. And I think the real problem with the prequels is how it feels like the characters in it, they're everything is so stilted. Their interactions, it's the characters and the script and the acting that betrays. And it's not because they have great actors, but even Sam Jackson, one of the baddest motherfuckers in the universe, is not so good as Mace Windu. And is it because Sam Jackson's a bad actor? No. But in the way they made those films and in the dialogue he's given, and George Lucas, of course, I feel that sometimes we're kind of watching that the movies are previs, waiting for the actual real acting to come in and the real screenplay to come in. But there's a lot of interesting stuff there, and I find myself, I was always an Attack of the Clones supporter. The Battle on Geonosis, man, I'm so there for that. But anyway, I don't think they're great movies. And but big imaginative fun, sure. It wasn't until after Revenge of the Sith that I started really noticing a lot of the really negative sentiment toward the prequels. I'm not saying it wasn't there before, but I don't think the films are as universally hated as the modern narrative suggests. I actually wonder if there's a hipster I hated the prequels before it was cool aspect of the whole thing. No. Not that the prequels were flawless, far from it. Attack of the Clones was genuinely pretty bad, though I still enjoyed it. I just don't understand why people hate that movie as much as they do. Even so, they were imaginative, fun, and amazing to watch. In a certain context, they were the purest George works ever put up on the screen. Yes, because he didn't have anybody to say George to push back. He didn't have Marshall Lucas editing. He didn't have Gary Kurtz producing. He didn't have all these people questioning him. He probably didn't show the film to all of his filmmaker friends. Actually, he kind of did to get some feedback. But anyway. The fan-edited extended cut of The Phantom Menace is not remarkably different from the official releases. It only adds 10 minutes back into the film, with most of it being just a few extra shots and extensions to scenes, but there are a few new bits here and there. However, because of these little bits and extensions and the length of time that had passed since we'd both seen the film, it felt like we were watching it together in cinemas for the first time. I can't quite explain why it felt that way, but it certainly did, and it was amazing. As a result, for a couple of hours, both my friend and myself were kids again, having an absolute blast and sharing in the joy of some of the little surprises and unexpected Easter eggs, such as little Anakin getting into a fist fight with a young Greedo. Yeah, it was fan service, but it was good fan service. We were sharing in a cultural landmark together and further cementing our bond as best friends, as if we were boys back in school. See, when it comes down to it, isn't that all we really want from our popcorn entertainment? If that's what you got out of that viewing of The Phantom Menace with your friend, I'd say, how great was that? I'd say a smashing success. Don't let that ever. That's why I always say to people, look, I am not here, despite what people think on Twitter, I'm not here to ever prevent anybody from watching anything. If you want to watch something, watch it. If you enjoy it, enjoy it. Don't apologize for it. Embrace it. I don't want to tell anybody to like. If you like or not like things, if you like something, by God, love it with all your heart. And I even mean that when it comes to things like Star Trek Discovery. If you like Star Trek Discovery, don't let my vehement hatred of it dissuade you from liking it. It doesn't mean we can't like different things. You don't have to like everything that I like, and I don't have to like things that you like. It doesn't matter. That's what makes the world go round. And I don't believe in anybody. When someone says gatekeeping, I always feel that a gatekeeper is somebody that doesn't let you get to something. Well, I don't think we do that. I'm never going to tell a fan what they should or shouldn't like. There's a lot of things that I have right over there on my shelves that are quite questionable in terms of their quality. I like them, but I know what they are, and I wouldn't expect anyone else to like them. So, there you go. Moments like that are rare, I think, especially after becoming adults, and I certainly never expected it from a film we'd both already seen numerous times. However, it did happen, and I'm remarkably grateful that it did. We were both psyched to check out Episode 2, and we're both genuinely curious to see if the extended version is any better than the theatrical. Time will tell, but honestly, After the many years of lackluster, low-effort films that we've been bombarded with, I'd begun to lose hope of finding new content to bond with friends over. There is something very reassuring about the realization that sometimes just watching a slightly different version of something you love can have the same effect. I agree wholeheartedly. Anyways, I'm keeping this one short. I just thought it was awesome to have an experience like that, and I thought it was worth sharing, especially in these times. If you can find that kind of innocent joy in something mundane or simple, I think you should absolutely take advantage of it. I hope to have the same level of fun with the remaining 2 films, but we'll see. In the meantime, please take care of yourself, sir, and may the Force be with you. Sincerely, Matthew in Japan. And then Matthew sends in a few articles. The top 50 movie soundtracks of all time is one of them. Let's take a look at what Matthew sent me. And this is from The Ringer. And this was published yesterday. All right, well, let's see. Now, here's the thing that drives me crazy about when they talk about film soundtracks. There are soundtrack albums that are full of what are called source cues, which are songs. Songs are source cues. Diegetic sound, like if they're played in the movie, like through radios or something, or non-diegetic when you can hear the like Staying Alive, for instance, in Saturday Night Fever. I guess it could be both, but not really, because you're hearing it over the soundtrack. But there are score CDs, the film score, and then there are the music soundtracks. They're different things. But let's see, the 50 best movie soundtracks of the past 50 years. Well, number 50 is 8 Mile. Pretty good. I'm just going to rifle through some of these. Number 48, Judgment Night. Ooh, that's a good one. I'll agree with that. Number 45 is Grease, which is interesting because it comes from a Broadway play, but okay. Number 43, Moulin Rouge. Number 39 is Batman by Prince. Not one of my favorite efforts from Prince, but still, it's got stuff like The Future on it. I've seen the future and it works, or it will be. I've seen the future. And The Big Chill, love that one. Do the Right Thing, great soundtrack. Marie Antoinette, number 26. Inside Llewyn Davis, 24. That's got some songs that were written for the film that I actually like. Velvet Goldmine, great score. Number 16, Garden State, that was great. Number 14, Drive, got the chromatics. Number 13, Singles, great soundtrack. 10, Saturday Night Fever, 10. Wow, 10 is Saturday Night Fever. 9, let's go to the top 10. 10, Saturday Night Fever. 9, Dazed and Confused. 8, Almost Famous. 7, The Bodyguard. 6, Above the Rim. 5 is Superfly. 4 is Goodfellas. 3 is Pulp Fiction. 2 is The Lion King. And number 1 of the... what do you think number 1 is? I never meant to cause you any sorrow. It's Purple Rain on this list. I don't know if I agree with all this list. Purple Rain, the thing about Purple Rain is it's all original compositions. See, when you get into these kind of things, you're looking at Purple Rain's number 1, number 2, Lion King, number 3, Pulp Fiction. Those are all songs that were taken from other places, whereas Purple Rain was a lot of that music. I mean, that music for the very first time appeared in the film and the soundtrack. So it's different. I mean, Goodfellas, again, those are all source cues, catalog titles. So this list, it's an interesting list because I would subdivide this list into like original songs. For instance, in Almost Famous, yeah, you've got Tiny Dancer, but you've also got the actual songs that Stillwater, the band, plays in the movie, like Fever Down, all that. Kind of different, but interesting. I want to thank you for writing this in, Matthew. That was kind of fun. That was a fun diversion. So that's pretty good. Now, Pedro Ferreira. Pedro. I know Pedro's been waiting for this. Pedro Ferreira sent in his Ghostbusters Afterlife review. And who am I? What kind of friend would I be if I didn't read it? So, Pedro, longtime imagination connoisseur, here you go. It's his review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. The road that led to what became Ghostbusters Afterlife was a long and rocky one. A third Ghostbusters movie had been in development since the late 90s before work stopped. A proposed sequel gained traction in the late 2000s when Ghostbusters the video game went into production with the original film's cast lending their voices. A passing the baton sequel was at this stage not to be. The scripts worked on had some amazing high concept ideas, yet nevertheless none perked the interest of Bill Murray, who saw no reason to return to the franchise unless his character had some significant development. The death of Harold Ramis in 2014 then dealt the ultimate blow to any chance of reuniting the cast for one last outing. His passing allowed Sony to move forward with Paul Feig's Ghostbusters 2016 reboot film, which, let's just say, wasn't received that well. In fact, people hated it. The film felt forced in its message, the budget suffered a large amount of self-indulgence to the point of wastefulness, and most notably, there was a sense of smug self-patting on the back regarding the comedy, where those that worked on it thought their work was hilarious, whereas anyone who watched it found the whole thing cringingly unfunny. Of course, the film that some saw as a parody of the original failed to be successful at the box office. As someone wrote that, well, I'll get back to that. Fans had waited years for a proper sequel, and this was a slap in the face for the fans' loyalty. The point that no one ever brings up is that regardless of what you might think of the quality of the direction, the casting, or generally the script, the movie, even with these notable problems, still could have been an unearned success had Sony marketed it properly. People despised the movie as soon as they saw the first trailer because they thought it was a remake. Unbeknownst to those who didn't bother to see it, Ghostbusters 2016 was actually set in another universe, a spin-off movie, yet Sony's insistence on calling it just Ghostbusters made fans feel threatened this was going to replace the original. The movie begins with just Ghostbusters, however. For those that ventured to the end of the movie, it's called Ghostbusters Answer the Call, cementing its spin-off status. If Sony had done something as simple as changing the title of the movie to what it's called at the end credits, it might have raised or eased concerns slightly and allowed this misguided endeavor to at least make a profit. At the very least, the movie wouldn't have suffered an identity crisis. With the dust settled, Ivan Reitman thankfully saw sense to move forward in the proper Ghostbusters universe, getting the green light for a script by his son Jason Reitman, of all people. Working with Gil Kenan, the younger Reitman went on to create a film centering on a new cast of characters, but more importantly, one that would still honor the legacy of Ghostbusters while addressing this death of one of the series' main characters. A global pandemic forced the release of the movie 4 times. With that extra time to work on it, is it a successful return to the popular franchise? Well, spoilers ahead. It's a new start for the Spengler family. Having inherited her estranged father's old Somerville farmhouse, Callie moves in with her children Trevor and Phoebe. And when tremors and other strange events begin happening around the town, Phoebe, along with her new friend Podcast and summer school teacher Gary Gruberson, discover the town at the center of one of the biggest supernatural cross-dimensional rips in history. Only help from some old heroes and the spirit of an old friend can help them avert human annihilation. Who you going to call? Second time successful? In order to reduce costs, Ghostbusters Afterlife was made for a lower budget than the money-consuming 2016 movie. One way to help make a competent picture on a moderately budgeted $75 million, it's so funny to say that, was to put the film in a different setting. The move away from New York is a significant departure. Perhaps you could say it hurts the film, as the urban setting of New York gave the original movies a strong playground to create a story. The countryside setting, Somerville, Oklahoma, feels a little too visually barren to interest the viewer. I disagree with that. More was made of the budget by also shooting in Canada, therefore allowing the production to gain Canadian tax dollar credit. So, is it a much smaller movie and nothing above can change that? And the announcement that the new movie would feature kids as the Ghostbusters within a Stranger Things setting sent alarm bells ringing, made more obvious with one of its stars, Finn Wolfhard, in this reboot sequel. Stranger Things was always just a shallow Frankenstein of nostalgic elements found elsewhere in like Ghostbusters. Was it a good idea to copy a ripoff? The idea of kids who were Ghostbusters had already achieved much derision by fans with the cartoon series. I never hated the junior Ghostbusters as some did, but making a movie about kids who become Ghostbusters? I don't know. Is it not ironic through this review that I will keep comparing the movie's quality to the 1984 original when the main complaint by critics is that Afterlife references the 1980 film too much? 1980s film too much. Comparisons are easy to make with the high standards set by the latter, yet this irony should not be confused with fans wanting a film that lines up with the original yet offers something new. The problem comes from Jason Reitman thinking that being faithful to the original means remaking or using constant callbacks to it. Callbacks involve broken down technology being used, whether it's the proton packs, the ecto goggles, or Egon's PKE meter, which features a hidden taser. References are acceptable in moderation. In abundance, it shows a lack of imagination and desperation. The 2021 movie has a different location, yes, but at times fails to offer more. It also fails to offer the kind of comedy the original did, going for a more somber tone. One of the best reviews I think that I read was, again, in the comments of an earlier column I'd done, or an earlier show, where someone said that Ghostbusters Afterlife is a reverential movie about a film that was originally all about irreverence. And I think that pretty much sums it up for me. The script's comedy does not sparkle like the 1984 movie did. A few jokes work, the rest do not. That's not to say the new characters don't make some kind of an impact. McKenna Grace is the most interesting of the new younger cast, especially as the film focuses on her as much as Egon's legacy. It should as well, since Phoebe is presented as a successor to Egon. She is often presented to be the smartest as well as the most responsible member of the family, and Grace does a great job of showing how her intelligence can make her an outcast. Her journey from not being able to show emotion to her teary breakdown at the end is extremely well written and acted. Kuhn, as Egon's daughter Callie, however, has problems. Callie is set up as a bitter and jaded individual. She's a single mother, and her father, leaving her at an early age, casts a shadow over the family. Kuhn's character is irresponsible and unloving, 1 minute ordering her daughter to pick a door lock while ignoring the latter's distant behavior. The idea is to begin with Callie as being uncaring, to finally change when she understands what her father did for her, but the writers do too good a job with her negative persona, with either Kuhn or the script making her borderline unlikable at times. Paul Rudd as teacher Gruberson does better with his mix of eccentricity and slapstick, perfectly in line with the original film actors, to the point he makes the rest of the new cast lack charisma. If they ever did a Ghostbusters movie with adults talking on ghost capturing duties, he would fit right in as Rudd gets it. Logan Kim's podcast I was expecting to find annoying. I mean, who names themselves Podcast? But to be honest, Kim's youthful enthusiasm recalls Dan Aykroyd's Ray. Trevor and Lucky, Celeste O'Connor, fare less well as characters. Trevor's constant ineptness is more embarrassing than funny, while Lucky as the young Peter character always seems a little too insecure and flippant to relate to. Meanwhile, J.K. Simmons as Ivo Shandor and Gozer, now played by Olivia Wilde, are either given little to do or given little direction. In terms of the visuals, it's a mixed bag. The mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men are there to appeal to kids, but offer no tangible physics to be anything more than visually fake. But they tried. Physical puppetry effects like the Demon Dogs fare better because they're real. Muncher is certainly no substitute for Slimer. Perhaps part of the problem is the modern Hollywood trend of tinting the picture teal and desaturating the picture so that blue skies look pale white. It becomes difficult to see the color of the ghosts pop out. The original movies were always a little dark with their cinematography, but natural color and brightness were maintained. The CG visual effects tend at times to look like paintings or video game cutscenes, to the point that reusing the original effects tends to show the new effects up. Ghostbusters 2 still has the best effects of the movies, and this shouldn't be the case. Ooh, I totally disagree with you there. Speaking of the sequel and Reitman's attempts to stick mostly to the original, no explanation is given as to why the Ecto-1 still exists, but the more modern Ecto-1A doesn't. In terms of music, Rod Simonson reuses Elmer Bernstein's score from the original, and it works for the most part nicely. The editing is fine, but it lacks the wit and timing of what made the original movie so entertaining. In terms of editing, the filmmaker also uses modern choices I can't stand. The film has its jump scenes like the original movies did, but they aren't handled well. Reitman takes the standard silence, boo loud noise jump scare, but overuses it to the point it becomes infuriating. The editing during the climax of the movie also comes across too frantic, with the director trying to cut between 10 characters all at once. It ends up confusing. If it comes across as complaining and nitpicking, it's because the original movie in the franchise, is my favorite. To me, it deserves respect. Therefore, it would be dishonest to say the film isn't ultimately successful in what it's trying to say. Its message of accepting a family legacy rather than dismissing it outright resonates the most, and provides Afterlife with a nice epilogue not just for Egon, and also for Ramis, who is an underrated talent in the film industry. Though both the characters of Phoebe and later Winston, the film teaches the viewer that you can achieve a more fulfilling life if you don't run away from your legacy but embrace it. This, of course, has real-life parallels with Jason Reitman's previous difficulties accepting his father's legacy as wanting to not be in his shadow. I think he's done a fine job of that, frankly. The climax of the movie, featuring the return of the original team, threatens to show up the new cast in the charisma stakes, while Egon's CG spirit, with actor Bob Gunton as Ramus' stand-in, is so well handled it manages to make even the most cynical viewer teary-eyed. I would go as far as to say Afterlife most feels alive through its characters at the end of the film, when they all either understand the Ghostbusters legacy or re-embrace it. It's a special moment, but the movie needed more of those. The film was never going to reach the heights of the quality that was the original, and it certainly is a step down from the 1989 sequel. Nonetheless, Jason Reitman's movie is an important step forward, and any step forward at this stage has to be a good thing for this film series. Welcome back, Ghostbusters. Well, the main problem with Ghostbusters Afterlife is that it relies too heavily on the original movie for inspiration without providing the kind of characters that were interesting in the original movies. Yet above these criticisms, the film manages to at least partially entertain and does an emotionally satisfying job of not only wrapping up Egon's legacy, but Harold Ramis's legacy as well. I just wish the original actors were more involved, but coming from a Ghostbusters fan with very high standards, the filmmaker was at least partially successful in both closing the original movie's legacy while forging a new one. With the stalling and missteps the franchise has taken over the years, you can't ask for more than that. That is great, Pedro. Thanks for that review. But I got to tell you, I think Ghostbusters Afterlife is a fine film. I just don't think it ever needed to be made. To me, while they did make a Ghostbusters 2, which had some good stuff in it, I thought it was... I didn't like it nearly as much as the original. But again, to me, Ghostbusters Afterlife was very reverential, and they did try and make a movie that would honor... It was more about honoring... In a way, Ghostbusters Afterlife, I thought it was well made, but it's about the legacy of the movie itself and how we as the audience relate to it. Now, I thought it was pretty clever what they did, but it wasn't. It was bizarre in the sense that it's an interesting way to keep an IP alive, but at the same time, it's a very different kind of a movie. And I keep going back to what someone wrote on the comments. Ghostbusters Afterlife is a reverential movie that's all about another irreverent movie. It's more about the audience for Ghostbusters than it is about Ghostbusters itself. And I think that's true. And Ghostbusters Afterlife, while I understand why it was made, it's a really great, interesting way to reuse or to re-energize an IP. But it did seem to me ultimately to be a bit hollow in the sense that they were trying to create a reverence and they were trying to create a mystique around the original Ghostbusters that it was a different kind of a movie. It had more along, like Stranger Things is a good example. I mean, Stranger Things takes what Stephen King was doing and what Steven Spielberg was doing in the 80s and kind of mixing it all together. But after the first season, Stranger Things never felt it was, and I'm somebody who lived through that, so it was all about, and same with Ghostbusters Afterlife, it kind of was reverential to nostalgia that we've had over the course of time as to really being about what actually was going on, if that makes any sense. I don't know. But a fine letter. I want to thank you for writing in. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So yeah, it's an interesting. I keep going back and I think to myself, Ghostbusters Afterlife to me made me wish that those resources that Jason Reitman, all the filmmaking and the actors, and it's a handsome film, and I really like Carrie Coon, and Finn Wolfhard is great, McKenna Grace, great stuff. I would love to have seen a brand new movie. I mean, it was really, Ghostbusters Afterlife made me yearn for the days of when I went and saw Ghostbusters in the theater for the very first time. I think I want to say I saw it in 70 millimeter. I want to say I saw it at the Cinerama in Seattle. And it was a grand time at the movies. It was so much fun. Not knowing what it was and not knowing where it was going to go, and meeting Gozer the Gozerian for the first time and hearing those lines like, "Are you a god?" "No." "Then die." I love that shit. I mean, that was great. And Winston, next time someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes. I've seen shit that'll turn you white. I mean, there was a lot of great lines in there, and that's what made it fun. Ghostbusters Afterlife felt it wasn't Ghostbusters. It was a movie that was actually about our feelings of how we feel about Ghostbusters. It was a weird hybrid of honoring art and nostalgia from a long gone era, but being something very different at the same time. It was odd. I don't think I've ever seen a movie quite like it, really, in terms of what it was trying to do. But yeah, certainly a respectable film. I just thought it was odd, and it just made me realize I'd really like to see something new and unique. And I'm really wondering if the end of this year that's brought us Ghostbusters Afterlife is now going to give us The Matrix Resurrections, which is in a similar kind of a vein. That's why I think I'm really curious. I'm really actually very excited to see Matrix Resurrections because, it's funny. Obviously, The Matrix is very groundbreaking, and while The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions are a mess, they're very ambitious messes. And people can talk about, well, the Raven Zion what was that all about? Well, you got to party, if I was unhooked from a battery and I found myself in the real world, I'd want to go to a few raves in Zion myself. But yeah, there's all kinds of craziness. But the wild ambition on display, I mean, I understand the scripts are half baked, but man, they did some cool stuff. And in a way, the three Matrix movies have a lot of ambition in them, and I would rather see unbridled ambition not work than something that's less than ambitious that does work, if that makes any sense. But I'm really curious to see Matrix Resurrections because while not as much time has passed as Ghostbusters, it's going to be interesting to see. It seems to me that they're both dealing with the legacy of where those films stand in the real world as much as they are new movies. So we shall see. And I think that could be very, very interesting. But who knows? Could be. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to sing any Sondheim for you right now. But I could if you want, but I won't. Calvin Bowes, our friend Calvin, writes in. Hang on, sends in a tip. Let's go and see what you guys... Let me switch over and see what you're saying now. Because I don't know. What are you saying? Calvin Bowes says, new Star Trek creators should ask themselves. I love... Okay, everyone knows that we have Braxton Bowles, who's Calvin's young son. Braxton, I think, would be 7 now. He must have had a birthday, right? So Braxton, our young budding imagination connoisseur, has been watching Star Trek. Calvin, his father, who's a great dad, took him to Vegas, met Shatner. You've seen the videos on this channel. Calvin says, new Star Trek creators should ask themselves, why would a 6-year-old kid be more interested in an autograph from a minor actress from Mudd's Women than the star of the new Star Trek, Michael Burnham? Sonequa Martin Green. We know, but they can't figure out that simple question. Look, this week's episode of Discovery, Michael Burnham inserts herself in to be the problem solver. I mean, it's interesting because the real definition of a Mary Sue character is an author who's basically writing themselves into the story. And it was really popularized in Star Trek fiction. And Diane Carey, her novel Dreadnought, that was actually published, and it was a young woman who's part of the lower decks ends up saving all of our main characters. To me, that's what a Mary Sue is. A Mary Sue is not necessarily a character that can just do everything, but the author is writing themselves into that story. And I guess you could say that as an extension, it might be, a character like Ray is a Mary Sue because she can do everything. To me, Michael Burnham is the very definition of a Mary Sue character because she's always written like, it seems to me like the entire writing staff gets a crack at, I'm going to insert myself into the story somehow. And there's never an opportunity where Michael Burnham, it doesn't matter if it's diplomatic, it doesn't matter if it's, going to save the ship in a work bee. It becomes almost parody. And I can't get past it. I watch this and I'm like, this is a complete Star Trek Discovery to me is bad fan fiction. And it just gets worse every week. But hey, that's just me. Ethan Holgate. And by the way, your son, I'll tell you something. The reason Braxton as a young budding, you did say 6-year-old, so he's not 7 yet. So Calvin's saying that Braxton's still 6. Okay, but I think that they don't set up situations that are the traditional adversity where heroes overcome the adversity. It's not done that way. It's almost like a fait accompli. I never feel that Michael Burnham is ever in any trouble ever because she's going to solve every problem. There's no real danger. You're watching these characters go through the motions, and I feel like I don't believe there's nothing in Star Trek Discovery that I believe. I don't even believe the way space looks. The color schemes that they've chosen, don't believe it. I don't believe the Discovery, the way it goes out and spins around and uses its spore drive. There isn't one thing in Star Trek Discovery that makes me suspend my disbelief. If there is a show that has a lack of verisimilitude, Star Trek Discovery is it. It defines lack of verisimilitude for big budget science fiction. Maybe that's part of it. Ethan Holgate sends in a tip, 1 or 2. Hi, Rob. I mentioned a few shows ago that I got the UK DVD of Free Enterprise, and I love the movie. Thanks for letting me know that there was an extended edition. Happy to tell you that I found a copy on Amazon. Very happy to check it out at some stage. I think it's a better version of the movie, to be honest. We cut out a big Shatner speech at the end that was a big mistake. I capitulated. Ethan goes on to say, especially with the special features on it, very excited. Also, I have to say I disagree. I've personally loved all the Marvel movies that have come out after Endgame, and I think they're building onto the next great thing. So I don't think they are on the ropes, in my opinion. I don't either. Michaelito says, it's better than Cats. I think you mean West Side Story, and it's good to hear. Joe, the lawyer, sends in a super chat and says, the new stuff doesn't excite me. I was never a comic book kid, too expensive, but I know the main characters. I have no connection to the new ones. Well, Joe, I think you've pinpointed the sentiment of a lot of people. Shang-Chi was never even a character that was popularized in animation. I mean, I loved the Master of Kung Fu comics when I was a kid because it was martial arts meets James Bond. And in the 70s, where Shang-Chi really came from, it was a big deal. Like, I used to love getting the Master of Kung Fu comics, because when you're a kid, you pretend you're a Kung Fu master. You karate chop everything. So I can understand that. I think you've nailed part of the issue is people don't know who the Eternals are. Shang-Chi, Black Widow is too late. I think the Black Widow movie probably should have come out after Civil War or something, but it didn't. Although I think Yelena Belova is a great character, and I can't wait to see what happens with her. All these people that have renewed Alex Katrubis, Elvis Velasquez, Joe the Lawyer, Movies and Beyond, Wayne Edwards, L. Wren, John Stevens, Journey's End, Michael Brammer, Jackson Perez, Claudius, Christian 301291, John Ortiz, all renewed or became members. I want to thank you all for supporting the channel. I hope that next time, I think we're going to do it next weekend, on the 18th, we can talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. I hope you all come and join us for member chats. We're going to do one more next week for the end of the year, a week from Saturday, a week from tomorrow. And I haven't seen a lot of you. I'd like to meet all of you. And Emil Johansson does say the MCU has nothing to prove after Endgame. Yeah, no, they don't. But they're going on because, they're still making money. And why not? It's still fun. Flickin' Real says, Rob, can you share the link to this article? Uh-oh. You mean the article I was reading? Yes. Let me find it because I closed that link, but it's here somewhere. Could be. Why can't I find it? 50 best soundtracks. Shoot. I found it. I found the article. And I will put this article in the live chat right now. I found it. Sorry, it took me a minute to find it, but allow me to put it into the live chat. I'm dropping it in right now. There you go. So there you go, Flickin' Real. Thanks for the super chat. Very much appreciated. 6 Scale Mafia send in a super chat. It's no secret people have always hated on new iterations. The problem is now it's justified. A lot of companies are taking beloved franchises and using them as a platform first and a story seventh. LLAP. Yeah, you're right, 6 Scale Mafia. Don't I owe you some money? I think I do. But you're right. And look, Alex Kurtzman has come right out and said it. What I find so interesting about that and maddening is that who are you to even have a platform? What do you know that I don't? Why are you using a Star Trek as a platform to what? To tell me I'm wrong? What are you doing with it? Look, as I've always said, great storytelling, and I would like to think that my life has been in service of learning about how to tell great stories and experiencing great stories. Great stories are all about conveying human truths to one another. We use the great stories to hopefully, within those stories, it's the easiest way to convey these truths without seeming standoffish. I mean, during the, obviously, Star Trek's allegorical storytelling nature was the way, or look, to me, the Twilight Zone and the original Star Trek are great examples of the time in which they were made under the constraints of what network television was able to show audiences. They got away with a lot. Nowadays, Star Trek Discovery feels so didactic and heavy-handed. I'm like so much stuff. And I will say, I have to say this. I did watch the first 2 episodes of the new Sex and the City. And while I enjoyed, I like Sex and the Cities, and just like that, it's also very heavy-handed to a certain extent about a lot of these things. And while it's great that everybody is addressing these issues, it almost makes it seem like the overarching issue of our day is representation for certain kinds of people. And I think that we are really straying away from other messaging that we really need to do as well, such as, a lack of education, income inequality, these things. There are levels, and I think that our entertainment is beginning to stray away based on the people that are making entertainment and the fact that they've taken up the idea that they need to certainly virtue signal. And I think it's dangerous, to be honest. And I think a lot of the things that we need to keep the eye on the prize. We're missing out on that. But there you go. Stubble McShave says, I think Rick McCallum was very competent in his role as a producer, but maybe he should have rightly said less of yes man at times. George needed some pushback. He did. He needed some pushback. If you've ever watched the documentary The Beginning, which is about the making of episode 1, I don't even know if you can get it now. I don't even know if it came out on the Blu-rays. I'm not sure, to be honest. I really like that documentary, but I remember George Lucas showing the battle droids to Steven Spielberg, saying, these are the new stormtroopers. And you're looking at those designs, and it's like, dude, come on now. Really? But hey, but I think that's what needed to happen. Sonny Dominguez, our man Sonny Dominguez said, no Dazed and Confused or The Crow on the soundtrack list. Oh no, they were absolutely there. You know what? I'm going to get that list and put it. The Crow. Oh, I don't know about The Crow, but Dazed and Confused was on that list. I didn't read all of them. I was cherry picking on that list. So, yeah. By the way, Rob, I will bug you once again. Have you seen New Order yet? I saw Belfast last night and seeing Meet the Ricardos tonight. Lucy is the reason I wanted to be a comedic actor. She remains the queen. I've not watched New Order. I'm probably going to watch it this weekend. The only reason I haven't watched New Order is it's a Region B disc, and I packed away my multi-region Blu-ray player, which I need to get out. So, yeah. RRTNZ says, good Lord, Bob, when do you sleep? Great to see you supporting the Critical Drinker on his 1 million stream yesterday. Cheers to all the Post-Geek Singularity. Hope you're well. Well, I've done a few great streams with the Critical Drinker. I really like his stuff. And he asked me to come on the stream, and I was happy to support him. I've been watching him for a long time. By the way, it's funny. He asked on the live stream what are some of the favorite streams that I had done, and I was thinking back to one of the early times I watched him. He did a review of the first Rocky movie back in 2018. So I would say go check that out. Lieutenant Commander Salinga sends in a tip and says, Feige being a TNG fan, referencing TNG's All Good Things, time travel to former sequences, and in Star Trek VI in Endgame, the signatures. I wonder how much he learned from the coherent universe building from 1987 to 2005 done by producer Rick Berman and used it for his MCU. Well, Lieutenant Commander Salinga, I think a lot. I think he was a big Star Trek fan, and it had a big influence on him, and I think that there's a big influence on the way the characters in the MCU act. I mean, I really love Endgame. It's maybe less viscerally satisfying than Infinity War, but it is more like a Star Trek episode. And I really love it for that. And I think if you're going to look at something, look at the characters and the teamwork and all that. And all of that. So, yeah. Tom Jr. Jackson says, don't forget Viacom is partnered with Wattpad for stories. Yes, Wattpad is a place where fans can go write stories. So it's very interesting that having made a Star Trek fan film or worked on a Star Trek fan film project myself, it's interesting that Viacom is now looking to fans to create work, which is crazy. Emil Johansson says, I booked Matrix 4 today. I'm excited. Yes, I can't wait to see it. I am very excited too. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, there's more drama, character development, and verisimilitude in the Star Trek book Avatar, which I'm reading for the first time, than in all of Discovery. 200 Watt Studio, you are going back to that the whole 20 years. Yes, there is. Because all the writers of the Star Trek novels, I'm not saying they're all the greatest writers in the world, but all the people that have been writing Star Trek novels for the last 20 years know and love the Star Trek universe. And they stop and they think, okay, if A, B, and C are true in the Star Trek universe, then D, E, F are also true. And now I'm going to tell you what G, H, I, or whatever, or the rest of the alphabet's going to be. And it all makes sense. And there is a great continuity there. And by the way, if I can give a shout out to David Mack and the final Coda book, which I've now read twice. I mean, if you want to read the biggest barn-burning crossover action sequence of all time, I mean, truly, now no one's said it, they haven't said it, but it is really their Crisis on Infinite Earths. But like the last 200 pages of Star Trek Coda Oblivion's Gate, it's great. I mean, just the if you really want, it's so over the top and outlandish and awesome, and it's just fun. It's just fun. Yeah. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring Robservations episode number 769, dude, to an end. And, of course, tonight, please join Lael and myself for Midnight Metal, where we will have some kind of an erudite conversation about storytelling of some kind. And, yeah. And I want to say R.I.P. to a certain character, but I don't want to ruin it for anybody. Oh, also, on another note, before I sign off, I did watch The Expanse, the first episode of The Expanse Season 6, which I enjoyed. I feel sad that there's only 5 more episodes left, but it did a good job of reestablishing where we're all at. And I enjoyed it. I mean, obviously, I watched The Expanse, and I want it to be much longer, but it's a show that certainly knows what it's doing in terms of its character development and bouncing around the galaxy, and it has a lot of scope, and it's a beautifully produced show, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if I might invite everyone, Lost in Space also had a great final, a great conclusion to that series. Beautiful show. Yeah. So anyway, a lot of good stuff out there this month. The new movie with Mahershala Ali about, which I haven't seen, Swan Song. I'm looking forward to seeing that if you haven't seen that. So check that out because it looks good. I love Mahershala Ali. And on that note, everyone, I want to thank everyone for generously supporting the channel through memberships and tips and super chats and all that. Thank you so much. I want to thank my moderating staff, although I don't think there is any moderators here, but I made oh yeah, Brian. Oh, I'm wrong. Darren Seeley and Brian Hepburn here. Thank you, gents. And I made Tom Jr. Jackson a moderator in case, no one's here. Justin Toner's here too. I'll be back tomorrow. Of course, more Midnight Metal, more Robservations, more Let's Get Physical media. Haven't really bought much, though. I've been waiting for a lot of things I haven't got. So not a lot to show, but we're still coming back. Dieter and I all will be back on Sunday for another Let's Get Physical media and all of those things. And so next week, okay, I got to tell you, the Hollywood Half and Half, I tried it as an experiment for 3 weeks, and I was like, I didn't do it this week, but people seem to like it, and I think I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it, instead of at 8 o'clock, I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock. So the Hollywood Half and Half is going to be from 9 a.m. to 9:30. That's what I'm going to do it from now on. I'm going to keep doing it. People like it. It wasn't getting a lot of views, but I had fun doing it. It was just a lot of work because I had to get up early. But if I got up a little, if I did it at 9 instead of 8, for me, it'd be more manageable. So I think I'm going to do that. Bring back the Hollywood Half and Half. And next week, Sonny Dominguez, I'm going to do Midnighters as well. Because why not? We're leading up to the very end of the 3rd season of the Burnettworks Robservations show. And we're going to go into season 4, where things are going to change up, doing some new things around here, and all of that. So on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everyone, have a better day. And I'll see you tonight on Midnight Metal.